Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Greetings, podcasters. You've been recruited by the Lambcast to defend the movie of the month against Zur and the Coogan Armada. Welcome, everybody, to Lambcast episode number 740. I'm your temporary host, Richard Kirkham, from Kirkham A Movie A Day. And on this episode, we'll celebrate the July movie of the month, a film filled with nostalgia, technological breakthroughs, and generally warm memories, The Last Starfighter from 1984. I'm no Centauri, but I've recruited 3 defenders of the frontier to join us for our discussion. Starlight, Starbright, first podcaster I see tonight, Todd Liebenow from the Forgotten Filmcast is joining us. Welcome, Todd.
To infinity and beyond. Oh, no, sorry, wrong franchise.
Next up, his plan to replace the master spy that we recently lost, going under the disguise of a mild-mannered Brit. Be quiet as we welcome Tony Coogan from Coog's Reviews.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And finally, keeping up appearances, our beta unit from north of the border, the champion of this month's film, a starfighter himself, Matthew Simpson from Awesome Friday Podcast.
Interstellar.
Well, the film is The Last Starfighter from 1984. It's a fantasy science fiction film about, it's already been said, recruiting starfighters to fight against Zur and the Coogan Armada. And it features a video game, aliens from 1,000 worlds, and a lot of early computer-generated imagery. But we're going to let Matthew Simpson, who championed the film, take over the discussion and decide which things we want to talk about and emphasize. So, Matthew, the show is yours.
Excellent. Well, I just wanted to say, everyone, thank you for voting for the movie that I love so dearly and joining us on the show. I guess for those of you who haven't seen the movie, the basic plot recap is that Alex Rogan is a teenager in 1984 America, living in a trailer park. Very little in terms of prospects, but he's really good at the video game. There's a video game cabinet in the trailer park, and one night he sets a high score in the video game. And it turns out that the video game is a recruiting tool for the Star League, and he's been recruited to be a starfighter pilot and fight against the bad guys and save the galaxy. This is a wonderful, silly, nostalgic movie, and what I'd like to start with really is just everybody's journey with the film. Now, mine is that I saw it on TV probably in the late 80s, and then continued to see it on TV through the 90s and into the zeros, and eventually I have owned it on DVD and Blu-ray, and more recently upgraded to 4K. And it's just one of those movies that, along with Star Trek and Star Wars, has been in my life as a franchise of note, even though it's a one film franchise. So, why don't we just go around the table and speak about it? And Tony, why don't we start with you? What's your journey with The Last Starfighter?
Well, most of my journey with film starts fairly recently, actually. I was a bit more aware of this through cultural osmosis and with works that have been inspired by The Last Starfighter, mainly the books of Ernest Cline, in particular Armada, and other times it's been referenced in Sci-Fi recently. But I actually first watched it just about 2 months ago as part of the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival in Bristol, which I've said it before on this podcast, it's an excellent festival, and anyone in the UK who's able to get to it, I highly recommend you do it if you get the chance. And as part of their festival this year, they showed the recent 4K remaster that Arrow have put out, and that's the one that's really good. if I get a chance to get that Arrow Blu-ray, that'll be a great one to see. But actually watching it for the first time on an IMAX screen, and also with introductions at the start from Nick, well, recorded ones anyway, from Nick Castle, Lance Guest, and Catherine Mary Stewart. It just had the right atmosphere to watch this for the first time. You could feel the nostalgia from a lot of the audience, and just how just into it they were, even though it wasn't really it's not really as big a one, at least to my knowledge, in the UK as in America, but there was still a palpable sense of nostalgia of people watching it. And even like the younger people in the audience watching it for the first time, the teenagers and kids watching it, you could feel that they were really getting into it. I found like this to be, there are some bits which are a bit, don't really hold up as well, but it's very heartfelt film. It's got its heart on its sleeve. It's very earnest, and as a good old-fashioned like adventure sci-fi film, it's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. As a person who owns the Arrow Video 4K disc, I can confirm that it is great. And I actually upgraded to that from the Arrow Video Blu-ray. So it's great, and there's a ton of great special features as well.
As expected from Arrow.
Yeah, I'm just going to stick with you for a second to ask, we'll come back to it, but like, thumbs up, thumbs down, the early CG on the IMAX screen?
Slight thumbs down, but I mean, it's definitely is a bit, you can tell it's a bit wonky nowadays, but you can definitely understand that for the time, it feel very cutting edge. And actually for the video game side of it, thinking of it on that element, there are some parts of it which do hold up in like similar kind of way to Tron, the effects we got in Tron.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's move on to Todd. Todd, what's your journey with The Last Starfighter? Where did you first see it? How did you enjoy it?
Well, I was the target age group for this when it came out. I was 13 in 1984. I didn't see this in the theater, but I'm pretty sure I would have seen it, when it came out on video. In fact, my vague memory in my brain is that I actually saw it at school, because I was in middle school at the time, and in the winter time when we couldn't go outside, and at lunchtime or whatever, they would have movies showing in one of the gymnasiums during lunch. I think part of that was because the band director at our school also owned a video store, and I'm pretty sure one day that he brought in The Last Starfighter, and we just all loved The Last Starfighter. It was a movie that is squarely aimed at kids that were 13 at the time. There's a bunch of different elements. I'm sure we'll dig into this that pull from things that were very much on the minds of your average 13-year-old in 1984. And I won't say that it ranks among my most favorite of 84, but that's partially because 84 is such an amazing year, and there's so much competition in 1984 for the movies that are going to just be, have that special place in your heart. But The Last Starfighter is a wonderful memory of my teenage years, and a movie that was a lot of fun to revisit yesterday when I watched it. It was the first time I'd rewatched it in many years.
Yeah, I feel like it's very much a movie of the 80s, which is something I'm sure we'll come back around to in a few minutes. But Richard, how about you? What's your story with The Last Starfighter?
Oh, The Last Starfighter is one of those films from 1984 that I treasure. I wasn't 13. I might as well have been 13. I was 26 years old. I was married. I had summers off unless I had a summer class that I was teaching, which I might have that year, but the class would have been in the evening, so I had summer days available. I actually saw this movie before it opened. They had a sneak preview. I think it was 2 weeks before it opened. It might have just been a single week before it opened. I can't quite remember that. I do remember that it was playing the The film that we paid to see was Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, and that was like my second visit for that film. And Starfighter was the preview film, and we'd come to see Starfighter. They were giving out pinback buttons with the poster image on it. I've got 3 or 4 of those that I collected at the time. It was one of those movies that I was excited to see because it's a science fiction film. 1984 was filled with like a couple dozen science fiction fantasy kinds of films, and so it fit right into the category of the sweet spot of movies that I loved. And it has, as has already been mentioned, it's hard on its sleeve. It has got a very sentimental element to it, and I have made no bones about the fact that I'm a sentimentalist. I tear up at Jackie Chan movies, so if there's something about the movie that tugs at your heartstrings, it's going to probably work for me. And this is a movie where the focus of the story, of course, is the action, but it's also about Alex's life, about his relationship with his family and his little brother in particular. His little brother looks up to him, at the end of the final shot of the film is like the ultimate expression of what the movie's about. It's about having hopes and dreams and connecting with somebody, the generation behind you, and I just love that kind of stuff. I own this film. I owned it on VHS. I don't have the VHS anymore. I owned it on Laserdisc. I still have the Laserdisc. I do not have the signature edition Laserdisc, which came from Universal, I think it was. They were spectacular, and that is one that I still plan on acquiring at some point. Beautiful box set, but I don't have that. I then owned it subsequently on DVD and Blu-ray. I know I have a steel box. I'm not sure if it's the 4K upgrade or not. I bought it and I haven't opened it yet. And the reason I haven't opened it yet is because I've had a chance to see it pretty regularly. I saw it a year ago on the big screen at an Alamo Draft House screening, and I will be seeing it again in a month at a similar screening at Alamo. So
they're doing an 84 series right now, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've already got our tickets for that. We're going to be seeing it again. If ever I get a chance to see it on the big screen, I make that trip. And I probably have watched it, every other year or so since 1984. Not every year. It's not quite that frequent that it appears on my radar, but pretty damn regularly. And it's one of the films that I wrote about on a project that I did a decade ago where I covered all the movies that I saw in 1984. And it was one of my favorite posts of that year.
First off, let me just say, as a person who's seen this movie an uncountable number of times, but also never on the big screen, how jealous I am that you've seen it on the big screen several times. So I feel like that would be an amazing experience. Because it is such a heartfelt film. I think that's what really speaks, what really connects the nostalgia to it, is that it's very unabashedly, a family film and very positive. And even though there's an argument to be made that it's all on from, more expensive productions like Star Wars, like the Return of the Jedi was the year before, Star Trek was in full swing again. It was, arguably just made to capitalize, but feels like they made something really special and heartfelt and easy to connect to, especially one of you mentioned you were 13. I was probably about 10 when I first saw it, in probably like 8 or 9 actually, in like in 1989. So yeah, I think millennials like me are probably still like the exact target audience as well. And it has that sort of nostalgia feeling that maybe films have lacked. Maybe not fully lacked, but they don't have in the same way that they did in the 80s.
Well, it's a film that, kind of what I was hinting at earlier, there's a lot of elements to it that if you break it down, you can see where they were like, oh, well, kids like this, kids like this, kids like this. It's very much inspired by Star Wars, obviously. Just, the whole, there's an evil empire out there and all that kind of stuff. It's also a teen film, though, and this is right at the heart of the teen movie craze. 84, 85 is when the John Hughes stuff was starting to become big, and just we continued to see a steady stream of teen-centered films as the decade continued. It's playing off of the video game craze of the time. That was our lives, going to the arcade. And you've got it all wrapped up in this very Spielbergian package. If any movie can be called Spielbergian, it's this. It's clearly drawing from a lot of things that were on the minds of youngsters at the time. But it doesn't feel forced at all. It all feels very organic, the way that it comes together.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to say it. It
does have that teen romance element to it without necessarily the shenanigans kind of thing that went on in those teen films. There wasn't the lure of sex images. There wasn't cruel pranks being played. It was just kind of a romance in the background, kind of like a war story,
Well, yeah, for a movie that's about recruiting a kid to fight in a space war with a video game, maybe the most unbelievable aspect of this thing is, if you were an 18-year-old kid living in a trailer park and your girlfriend was Catherine Mary Stewart, would you spend all your time playing video games?
Not all my time, but certainly some of my time. It's one thing I wanted to touch on, actually. We're speaking about the nostalgia. I think it also speaks to just this sort of that weird ennui of being a teen in a place where you don't. As a person who grew up in a very small town, I sort of get it. Really connected with me in terms of that that ennui of being restless to get out of where you are, which I think is definitely a thing that a lot of teenagers go through. I think it really connects that well. But one thing that I really have loved about it all this time, and I'm going to ask you each to speak about it if you agree or disagree. But one of the things that I've always really loved about this film is is that sense of community that everybody has. Everyone in the trailer park that they live in, where Alex obviously feels trapped, also really loves Alex, and they're all very supportive of him and presumably everyone else. But legitimately, one of my favorite scenes in this movie is the beginning when he plays the video game, and the older guy who's standing there is like, "You're gonna bust the record," and then he calls the entire town, and they all come and watch him play this video game because they know it's important to him. Does that film? Am I alone here? Is that scene that scene really speaks to me in a way that, as a small town kid, I really appreciated, and as a small town adult living in a big city, it's something that I sort of long for. How do you guys feel about this scene? And let's start with Todd this time.
Oh, I agree. It's very sweet, and that moment, as I was watching it again, like I said, for the first time in many years, I was going, wow, everybody's really excited about this video game. The only thing missing is the guy running around saying a Donkey Kong kill screen is coming up, King of Kong reference there. But no, what you're saying there is very interesting, just the way that they portray this community. And, as the film starts, they're all waking up in the morning, and we kind of gradually see the trailer park come to life, and everybody's going about their lives, and it's all intertwined in that. And also just the way that the movie kind of establishes that Alex is very much trapped in the trailer park. He likes the people there. It's very much a family type of thing. But even the smallest attempt to get out for an afternoon and go to the lake, he can't even do that. So that feeling of being trapped there, even in an environment that you love, comes through loud and clear.
Yeah, he can't get to Tashi Station. He's stuck in the trailer park fixing the antenna on the trailer park, on the trailer there. I'm sorry. I got to jump in.
Would need some power converters.
I got to jump in a little bit because, the thing about it is that the trailer park is filled primarily with older people. Alex and his little brother and the girlfriend. What's the character's name? I should know that.
Maggie.
Maggie, thank you. they're the youngest people in the trailer park. You do see some other kids around also, but all the people that get involved with Alex are, not quite retirement age or retirement age, and they're excited about his success in that because, you know what, that's probably the active part of the world that they get to see. They're not interacting with a lot of other people on a daily basis, and so the kids playing and Alex playing the video game, it's something that people would probably pay attention to. His mom is the manager of the trailer park, which is why he ends up having to do all the fix-it things around there. So he knows everybody, and everybody knows him. And he's not going into Cheers where everybody knows his name. He's there at Starlight Starbright where everybody knows his name because he's been interacting with them on a regular basis, and that's what makes it more of a community thing. I mean, he really is one of the things that brings them together as a community, and that's another reason why his decision to go back later on and return to defend the universe against the Coogan Armada matters, because he realizes it's not just way off in the distance someplace, it's going to be his place someday that's being threatened as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty classic, like, refusal of the call and then come back. It's yeah. Tony, what about you?
So I agree that it's good to see this sense of community that we see in the trailer park. Well, something that fascinated me when I watched it was that there was like in other films like this where you get this small community, there'd be a sense of I don't know if this is the right word, but like contempt towards that community. Like we understand there's a frustration that Alex has, but it doesn't seem like it's hatred is born out of his desire to see some more, but it doesn't feel a sense of resentment towards anyone in the community. And you can imagine in a lesser film, it would be making fun of the people in the trailer park for the entire film just for them being in the trailer park. And it's my impression that we don't get that. If that's what helps make it feel a bit more heartfelt, as it just feels more honest and creating that sense of community.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in a lesser film, they would be making one of two things would be happening. The film would be sort of making fun of the people who live in the trailer park for living in the trailer park, but also the other way it might have gone is that the people who live in the trailer park might have wanted to keep him there, whereas they're all very supportive. They all love him. They rely on him, but they all love him, and they're all very supportive when it comes time to leave. But he's just an integral part of the community, and I think it would be portrayed a little more, maybe not maliciously, but selfishly in a lesser film. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
That's definitely true.
Yeah. I think that loving community being portrayed so earnestly and forthrightly is one of the things I've always loved about this film, personally. But yeah, let's move on. So obviously, let's just go on to one of the big topics for a lot of people at this point, which is that this film is one of the earliest examples of a film where almost all of the special effects, or certainly all the space-bound special effects and vehicles and flying and all that kind of stuff, is computer generated. And I'm just going to say up the top, I think it still looks great. It is definitely very polygony, but it is shocking how great it looks, even in 4K on my 55-inch 4K HDR screen today. I've always found the Gunstar, the actual Starfighter vessel that he pilots and is a gunner for, to be one of the great ships of sci-fi for me personally. And I'd love to hear how you guys feel about those graphics today. And let's start with Richard this time around.
Well, I tell you, when the movie first came out, they were groundbreaking, and you didn't get a lot of criticism. Yeah, you could notice that it was a little bit different, and it looks slightly animated, but there are some scenes that are just as sharp and distinct as anything that you saw in the Star Wars series, especially those scenes with the the Coogan Armada attacking and the Gunstar fighting. maybe the close-ups of the Gunstar hiding on the asteroid planet don't quite work because the backgrounds are just not rendered in much detail. But I tell you, nowadays when people criticize a movie for looking like a video game, it's a criticism. In 1984, it was probably a compliment because it was, that was the cutting edge of things. And I tell you what, I think that they use the computer to generate images, and before this, ILM and the Star Wars groups, they had models, and they used the computers to kind of film the models, not to create the images that are going on. It makes me a little nervous to think that maybe George Lucas saw this and said, hey, maybe if we digitalize everything, it'll be better. I'd hate to think that, Greedo shoots first because of the Last Starfighter, but that's the kind of insanity that can go on when people get touched by a little technological fever. And this movie, of course, is very early on in that process. We mentioned Tron, which was the year before, and it's also distinct, but the images in Tron were designed to look like they were in a computer. This is designed to kind of make a fantasy world rendering of what spaceships and other planets would be like. And I think it looks great. The Gunstar especially is got a lot of detail. And when you look at the Blu-ray version, I haven't seen like I said, I don't think I've seen the 4K. I don't think I've opened the 4K yet. It's pretty spectacular in the way it looks against the night sky. I like the kind of combination of a real world model of the of Centauri's car that then transitions to a CGI car that turns into a spaceship. They did that really well. For 1984, I think it looks terrific.
I was gonna say, I think what you're saying about the looking like a video game, that's something where I think now, watching it here 40 years later, and we are right at 40 years. I think the 40th anniversary was last week. But watching it now and going, well, it looks like a video game, kind of adds a new charm to it for me, because the whole way he's recruited, and that is through a video game. And so I'm kind of going, it feels kind of appropriate that when he's going and doing the real thing, it still looks like a video game.
You're right. The 40th anniversary was the show comes out on a Tuesday. So at the time that this podcast goes out, the 40th anniversary will have been 10 days ago. And I was going to say that you're speaking about how good the Gunstar looks against the night sky, but I would say there's a scene in the 4K that every time I see it, like my brain knows that it's CG because it's so blocky. But they made the real world car, Centauri's car, look so blocky that when it first takes off, there's a sort of slow pan across it as it flies into the night sky, and it looks like the real car to me every time. I know it's not, but it still looks like the real car to me. Tony, how about you? I'm curious to see how you felt about the graphics, having seen it for the first time so recently.
Yeah, because for me, I don't really have that bit of nostalgia for like the effects. It does have that kind of charm to me, but on some point side, they do hold up in some ways. Like the actual movements of the ships in space, they feel really groundbreaking for the time and still hold up as actually seeing them move in 3-dimensional space. Even sometimes in Star Wars ones, they still feel a bit more 2-dimensional at certain points. Whereas here, it get the sense of it being fully 3-dimensional and taking advantage of CG not having the space restrictions that practical models would have. Actually seeing it on an IMAX screen, the effects they were very blocky to me, and you can tell that it obviously weren't real, and say the infancy of the effects. But there is a distinct charm to that feel of it. I kind of feel like the same way that like you go to an old PlayStation game, like old PlayStation 1 game, like old Crash Bandicoot, or those type of graphics. You can tell that they're weaker compared to the modern style, but there's a distinct charm to them with how polygonal and blocky they are, which makes it endearing. and you get some of that with the effects here. I will say, though, with the effects, the practical alien effects look incredible. They hold up just as well today as they did in 1984, and actually see them in the 4K and on the IMAX screen. Those effects are very impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great alien design. You can tell they're really going for that Star Wars variety of aliens too. But yeah, the makeup effects especially hold up. And Todd, how about you? What's your thought on the CG?
Oh yeah, I still think it looks really good. You do kind of have to go, oh, okay, well, it was 40 years ago. This was a step. But I do remember, watching it back in the day and being like, wow, look at that. That's amazing. So, certainly there is some nostalgia still at play for me there. But I was actually pleasantly surprised when I watched it yesterday at just how well I thought it all still looked. And I think Tony's got a good point there too about the aliens. The aliens do look really good. I mean, clearly, again, where they're drawing inspiration for, they're going, well, we need our own cantina scene, and they do that in the little meeting with all the potential starfighters and such. And there's a lot of great stuff going on there.
I also want to point out that the design of Centauri's car as a DeLorean looking like space vehicle is a year before Back to the Future. So there's a reason that car was chosen for these kinds of films, because it looked like a space vehicle before it actually was turned into space vehicles.
Well, as Doc Brown said, if you're going to do that with a car, may as well do it with a bit of style.
Yes, exactly.
I was going to say, before we get off the ships and things like that, the Death Blossom is still one of the coolest things ever when it comes to a space attack move type of a thing. Maybe not terribly well thought out yet, because the fact that the ship loses all its power after it does that is a little bit not good planning. But still, just the idea that you flip a switch and start spinning around and just laser blasts everywhere, that is just cool. That is, whoever came up with that, you get points for all time there on that one.
Yeah, I mean, that does feel very, very video gamey. But it adds to the charm. It just get a feel of if this actually was a video game, that point where someone just randomly shaking the joystick around to get everything at the same time. But yeah, it works for the tone it's creating and the vibe it's creating. And yeah, I was actually seeing it on the cinema screen and hearing the audience react to it. I watched it. It's just a great bit of fun to see that in action.
I mean, for me, it's always felt like a video game power move. So, like the thing you do when you're overwhelmed, you do a power move, and just remember, it makes sense that they lose power because it's just an experimental prototype. So it's totally fine. That's haven't worked all the bugs out. Another thing I wanted to touch on is recently I went to, here in Vancouver, the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra does a series of films every year where they show the film and they play the score live. And this past week, I actually went and saw Field of Dreams that way, which is a total side note, but that is an incredible experience if you ever get the chance to do it. Apparently, it was the first time it's happened, been presented that way. And if it comes to your city, definitely do it. But the score of The Last Starfighter is another one that's like one of these big 80s, like John Williams-esque scores. Is this one that sticks in your minds? For me, it's one that I have found myself humming over the years, and I'm just curious if it's one of those for you as well. And Tony, let's start with you. How did you feel about the score? How did you feel about the score?
Yeah, I'm only saying about John Williams vibes of it. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's that right feel for this type of tone. There's very uplifting, very grandiose feel to it that works to selling the larger than life nature of the plot and the film. And yeah, also just as going to give us insight into what the experience would have been like for Alex, and just get on an auditory level. And you can definitely feel when I'm sitting with the audience, the people who were more familiar with it when they were growing up, that music just hits something with them. And I was that, like, when I was saying you could feel the nostalgia emanating from the audience, that music is really where a lot of that nostalgia came in.
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned John Williams specifically, actually, because there's a great moment in the special features on the 4K. They're on the Blu-ray too, if you get a chance. But there's a special feature about the score, and the gentleman who wrote the score, Craig Safan, who is most famous for doing the score for all of Cheers, which is an interesting. That's like his main thing. But he actually mentions, he's like, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the quote exactly, but he basically at one point says, he's like, they wanted John Williams, but they couldn't afford John Williams, so I had to give them John Williams that they couldn't afford, which is pretty funny.
That's a good quote.
Yeah, I'm messing it up. He's definitely a little more nuanced than that, but yeah, basically he's like, yeah, they brought me in because they couldn't afford him. Todd, how about you?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I sat down to watch this yesterday, and it starts in the first thing in the movie is the music, and I went, oh yeah, this is such a fun score, and I immediately went and bookmarked it on Amazon Music because I was like, I need to stream that one of these days here. It was a part of it that just instantly came back to me. But yeah, it's such a wonderful, rousing score. Like I said, the guy that did it, Craig Safan, not a name that I usually think of when I think of, my favorite 80s scores. But as I was looking, I went, oh yeah, he also did that great score for Remo Williams.
I knew somebody was going to bring it up. Excellent.
Yeah, Remo Williams also has a great score to it, which is honestly quite similar to the Last Starfighter score, just in terms of its energy. So yeah, I need to remember to go back and check out more of his scores.
Yeah, the instrumentation on both of those scores is very similar, and Starfighter's got an earworm theme that I can not get out of my head. Remo Williams is very recognizable to me. It's not quite as memorable, but I would pick it out and say, oh yeah, that's the Remo Williams theme that's going on there. And they do have a lot of similarities. Back in the 1980s, before video cassettes were not always inexpensive. The prices of them didn't drop until the late 80s. So up through probably 1987, the primary way that I relived my movie experiences was by buying the LPs of the soundtracks, and I know that I had both of those, and I listened to Starfighter pretty regularly.
Yeah, it was like only some movies that would come through at what they called sell-through pricing, right? And it was like the big hits, and you'd see just every now and then a handful of movies. Like you saying 87, that made me think, oh well, Top Gun was one of those.
Yeah.
And like in 89, Batman, but you couldn't just go buy the latest movie 3 months after it was released for $20. That was, we were far from that point yet.
Well, in 1984 Dune came out, and I had to have it when it came out on video the next year. I paid $82 for it.
Yeah.
Because it was not, like you said, not a sell-through price. But they just started doing the sell-through pricing on certain films, usually a year or two after they were out. I think Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan, not The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek 4.
Picture, probably.
Star Trek 4
Yeah.
was one of the first ones that they put out originally at a sell-through price. And then Blade Runner, if $40 was a sell-through price, then Blade Runner was also an early precursor to that trend. It took a while, but I guess they figured the rental market was not going to sustain the companies by itself. There's money to be made for themselves, and they'd get a bigger piece of the pie when they did that. Sorry, a little side note. I'm
going to continue it just for the fun of it, Richard, because right here on the desk that I podcast from here in the basement, I have a little stand-up tabletop display from a video store here in Denver. It was Denver's last video store that finally closed about 10 years or so ago. And it is the little fold-up display for order your copy today of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And this is from '84 because it's advertising Temple of Doom here at the bottom, and it shows the price, $39.95 to get your copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was a deal back then.
Yep.
I mean, I would have paid it. You know, it's interesting to think that VHSs were expensive at one point.
Is that the poster cut out with Indiana Jones' character cut out in front of the background of the cave with the red light behind it, Todd?
This is the Raiders poster, so it's the one with him.
It's Raiders, okay.
Yeah, so he's standing in the center, thrashing the whip, and then you've got the Ark behind him and the images of the other major characters kind of surrounding him, in the wall there. So
yeah, because I have the miniature standee for the Temple of Doom video release, and that's what I was thinking of. Okay, sorry. Again, sorry, folks. We're on sidetrack
comparing
here.
all of our memorabilia here. I've got one of Mr. T from DC Cab too, but that's not as exciting.
Yeah,
that's pretty exciting, actually.
You just think that with those prices, just again to keep the sidetrack going. It's about, like, for me, just growing up videos, like, for most, if I remember right, it's about £15 for VHS, and even now for DVDs and Blu-rays, it's about 15 quid. And those kind of prices, like for the more specialty ones, like I have paid a lot for ones. I paid £70 for the excellent set that Second Sight put out for Dawn of the Dead, but that was like an 8-disc film with the soundtrack, novelization, multiple books, and that's everything. Just thinking that along that kind of price just for the film on VHS, that's just mad to me.
Well, it was a different time, and most of the time they were selling them to retailers who were then renting the films, and they got a discount if they were buying it multiple copies, of course. So they probably weren't paying the $80, but if you went to one of those retailers and you wanted the movie, you paid the price that they were going to be quoted as the manufacturer's suggested retail price. And it was high. It was high until they figured out there was enough of a market. Once you got a penetration like 80 or 90% of VCRs in the population, then it made sense to be trying to sell not just to the rental companies but to the public at large. When it was down, the percentage of VCR owners was maybe 10 to 15% of the population. You say, no, well, this is going to be rental market. But as it got so ubiquitous, it just made sense. Unfortunately, it never hit the Laserdisc pricing that way.
I guess the new thing is always the expensive thing, at least for a little while, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't feel bad about the sidetrack at all. I very much enjoyed this part of it, but let's move on to some other performances. Now, I don't remember seeing Lance Guest in much else other than like this, and he did one of the Jaws sequels, right? Jaws the Revenge, I think, or Jaws 3.
Oh, that's
Jaws
right.
3D.
Yeah, no, he's in Jaws the Revenge. Yeah, he's he plays one of the Brody kids, I think, all grown up, if I remember correctly. He's Michael. Correct. He's Michael. Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I saw that film once. Is he the one who got eaten or the one who didn't get eaten?
I don't remember. I did a discussion with Jay on Jaws the Revenge on Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, because Jay always has me on for Michael Caine movies, apparently, because we did Beyond the Poseidon Adventure too. But yeah, actually, Lance Guest, today is his birthday as we're recording this.
There you go.
Yeah, so very appropriate.
Happy birthday, Lance. Hope you're out there listening.
So I lost my train of thought. So yeah, Lance Guest, maybe his best known role, but then also there's a whole cohort of amazing character actors and performers. I think we're going to talk probably about Robert Preston in the next little round, pretty specifically, but who else in this sticks out to you? Like, and let's start with I don't know what rotation we're on. Let's start with Todd. Who sticks out to you in the cast? Like, who's your sort of favorite performances here?
Well, I think Dan O'Herlihy as Grigg is great. It's a wonderful kind of I don't want to call him a sidekick. I mean, kind of more of a mentor type role. I mean, he's sort of like a goofier version of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he's a lizard type of a thing. He's just got kind of a wonderful jovial approach to things. Gives the inspiring speech when needed. So I've always really liked him in this. And I mean, of course, I can't not mention Catherine Mary Stewart. I mean, she ranks up there as one of those just, always adorable people. I mean, come on, I was a teenage boy in the 80s. So, I mean, if Phoebe Cates shows up or Catherine Mary Stewart shows up, I mean, that's something that you pay attention to. But I mean, beyond that, she's just so charming in this film. You watch that and you go, I want a girlfriend like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. As a person who was, watched this film as a teenager in the 90s many times, can confirm. Richard, how about yourself?
Well, when I'm anxious to talk about Robert Preston, we'll hold off on that for a second. Dan O'Herlihy is terrific as Grigg. I love the fact that, this is, he's an Academy Award nominated performer playing under more makeup than you can possibly imagine, and you still get the warmth of his voice and his eyes in that performance. He's really good in that. I don't remember the name of the kid who plays Lewis, but he was
Chris Hebert.
Yeah, he was exactly what a younger brother would be like. I thought he was terrific. Barbara Bosson had been on Hill Street Blues. That's where I knew her from, playing Alex's mom. She didn't have a big part in this, but she's a reliable background character actress. I just saw something. What's the character's name? She's I think it's Elvira in the movie.
Oh, Cassandra Peterson?
Maybe that's it. I saw her in something just this last week.
I thought you were talking about Elvira, like Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
No. The character. Her TV's out.
Oh yeah. Peggy Pope.
Peggy Pope. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? I just saw her in something, like I said, this last week. I got to look up.
My grandmother used to watch Barney Miller, and she was on that show, I believe. Not like as a regular. I think she made some guest appearances or something. That's the thing I remember being like, oh, people are in things. It was one of my early moments of being like, oh, actors play different people.
It's somebody else.
But seeing her on reruns my grandmother used to watch.
Yeah, a lot of TV from what I see on her Wikipedia page. She's in Once Bitten with Jim Carrey, an early Jim Carrey movie.
Underrated early Jim Carrey movie as well.
9 to 5, maybe that's what I'm thinking of that I saw her.
Oh, yes, she's I think you're right. She's like one of the part of the secretary pool
right.
in 9 to 5. Yeah.
But I'll hold my powder dry for Robert Preston when we get to that one.
Tony, how about you? Anyone stand out?
So yeah, I mean, as I said, Dan O'Herlihy is fun to watch. It's actually interesting for me because I know more for Halloween 3 and RoboCop, and thinking of those very villainous, definitely overtly villainous performance in Halloween 3 and the evil, textbook definition of capitalist leader in RoboCop. I mean, getting to see him here is a very different vibe I was getting. Then, yeah, the Capital series has that I think Girl Next Door kind of vibe, if that's the right way to describe it, as Maggie, and you definitely feel like, the the actual chemistry that Lance Guest and Catherine Stewart have together. It's a lot of fun to watch. I also think about it as well. Lance Guest is pretty much a dual performance that he's got playing Alex and Beta, and you have to see the differences between the two characters that make it an interesting an interesting watch, and you have to feel like more when he's playing Beta the oh god, why am I doing this shtick? He can't believe that he's stuck doing this, and the kind of the interesting vibe that's created between those two separate sides of the performance that makes it fun to watch.
Any of you listening who haven't seen the movie, Alex gets a replicant, basically, of himself to throw off the bad guys that stays on the planet Earth so that they think that the Starfighter is still there and they aren't tracking him across the galaxy, and that's referred to as the Beta unit. So there is this dual role that's going on. So if you were wondering what it was that Tony was talking about because you hadn't seen the movie, that's just a little bit of background. Sorry about that.
Well,
asterisk there.
I mean, that brought something interesting to mind, Tony, the way you were saying that, because you're right. There is definite chemistry between Lance Guest and Catherine Mary Stewart, and it's also quite skillful the way he turns that off when he's playing Beta. You know, it's because the two just are they're just button heads, when it's Beta and not really Alex. And so it is definitely a dual performance. It's very skilled what he does there to make it where you've got this great dynamic going on between the actual Alex and Maggie, and then that kind of comes to a screeching halt when it's this stand-in.
I mean, when they sit down to talk about Eric's Beta, you definitely feel a bit more, he does feel a lot more uncomfortable, and it's all jokes about some performances, the person that's never interacted with a human being before, like, is a way to criticize a performance. Whereas here, that's used to praise it. And actually how he plays it with the more positive interactions he has with everyone in the trailer park, and especially with Maggie when Lance is playing Alex. And there is Beta, there's a coldness to those interactions that he has as Beta that, just makes the dynamic more interesting. And although it does kind of raise the question of how no one noticed that there was something significantly off about him.
I think it's actually interesting because I think they do notice, but they're just like, oh, it's Alex, he's going through something, it's a very supportive community. Like, they're just like, let him work it out, he'll get these. He's a teenager, just let him go through it. It's an interesting thing to watch everyone sort of exist around him. And I think Lance Guest does a great job, especially as Beta, and in the scenes where he's trying to figure out how to appear human. The one that always sticks out to me is when they're in the back of the truck on the way to the lake and he laughs at a joke. It's like the most ridiculous laugh ever. And everyone's like, all right, weirdo, let's just keep going. It's fine. It's a pretty great performance. As a dyed-in-the-wool Trekkie, I feel compelled to point out that there's a number of connections here, but in terms of the acting, Marco Limo shows up as the Zandozan bounty hunter who is there to capture or kill Alex on Earth, who later would go on to be Gul Dukat in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And also Will Wheaton is in this as Lewis's friend in the background, which is an interesting connection. He doesn't have any lines. He's just present in the movie. But he is there. And I have always had a soft spot for Vernon Washington as Otis, as the sort of like kindly old man who is encouraging. He's the guy who calls the community together to watch Alex bust the record. He has some of the last lines in the movie where he's like talking about what a beautiful night it is after Alex leaves. It's a wonderful little performance that has like 5 scenes, and I've always loved that. And lastly, I don't know that I've seen this actor in literally anything else, but I also really enjoy Norman Snow as Zur, as the Bane bad guy, the He doesn't have a mustache, but if he did, he'd be twirling it.
He hams it up pretty well.
Yeah, he makes a whole hog out of his performance as he's the son of the head of the Star League who's gone turncoat and joined the Coogan to attack, and he is so over the top in just exactly the right way, and I've always really enjoyed that. But let's talk for a minute, I think, about the Academy Award nominee in the room. Richard, why don't you start us off talking a little bit about Robert Preston's performance? Because you said you were 26 when you first saw this. I was probably 9 or 10. And I can tell you, I have been waiting for Centauri to show up when I beat a video game my entire life. How do you feel? How do you like the performance, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I think that it was great that we got a sequel to The Music Man, and Harold Hill showed up as Centauri in this film. Robert Preston was. It's so funny because he's an actor who was in movies since the 30s. I saw him one time in Beau Geste with Gary Cooper and Ray Milland in 1939. The famous greatest year in movie history, and he's in that movie with those two guys. And here he is 40 years after that in this movie that's, like we've talked about, it's a nostalgic kid science fiction film, and he's great in this movie. He knows exactly what he's doing here. He puts personality plus into the role. What's on the page is not nearly as good as what he brings to the performance. He's got this outsized personality. He's smiling and winking at the camera. He's got this devil-may-care attitude. He's pulling Alex in with a shrug and a smile in every scene. And like I said, he's got that con artist charm that he's just replicated from the big success of The Music Man that is filling in perfectly here. And this was 2 years after he had been Academy Award nominated for Victor Victoria. And he's a terrific actor. This was his last screen role. He had a couple of TV movies that he did after this, but this was his last theatrical film. And I just think it's a great high to go out on. And I love his hat.
It's a great hat.
Yep.
Yeah. Tony, how about you? I'm very curious about all your reactions here, because you've seen it for the first time so recently. But how did you feel about Centauri?
Yeah, he's a lot of fun to watch. He got some kind of don't know some kind of Patrick Troughton Doctor Who kind of vibes from him. This kind of cosmic eccentric figure. It's a lot of fun to watch. That works really well opposite Lance Guest, and that we to have is a lot of fun to watch. And he does got some decent pathos towards the end of the film. What happens to his character, and I don't think you can feel there's a sense of frustration that he has towards Alex when he initially refuses the call. And yeah, as Rich said, they've got that con artist or more like a carny vibe to him that helps make him such an entertaining character to watch.
Yeah, I think the carny con man, that sort of classic archetype that he's doing here is, I think, as Richard said, it's sort of perfect it's exactly what the movie needs. I think it's one of the things that elevates the movie from just being, another sort of lost film from the 1980s is this performance. And, I think he nails it really well. Todd, how about you?
Yeah, I just echo everything that's been said already. It is a fun performance. It's done with a bit of a sly wink about all things sci-fi. A little bit tongue in cheek. It's a lot of fun. Actually, the more you guys kept on using the term con man to describe him here, it got me thinking about something I've never thought about before with the movie. Because in the movie, at the midway point or so, spoilers here, folks. Okay, I'm warning you. But Centauri dies, but he comes back at the very end, and I'm like, is he just playing Alex here? But, I mean, was he really injured enough, or is he just going, I just need to give him that last little push. So he goes out there and fights. And so, he lets himself appear to die there. And then at the end, he just comes back and is like, oh, no, my body was just recycling itself, or whatever it is that he says, But I'm like, maybe this was part of his plan all along here.
I like that theory.
So,
I wouldn't
theory.
be surprised that's the case.
I like that theory, and my question then just becomes, like, how many other people are involved? Because Grigg is definitely involved if that's a plan. And Grigg doesn't seem to type, so it's. But I do like that theory.
Like last minute, after all the other Starfighters were killed, oh crap, we need to get involved as soon as possible. Break out the dead Mentos trope. That always works.
Yeah, pretty much. I do love that end scene when he comes back and everyone's really happy, and Grigg does his ridiculous laugh that I can't quite replicate. I just love it. I also just love that everything we're saying about Preston is great, but I think he also has a talent for that thing that silly science fiction movies need, which is to be able to mix some pretty ridiculous material in with some pretty heavy and heartfelt material. There's a great scene in the middle, again, right when Alex is refusing the call, where he's talks about what if Christopher Columbus said he wanted to stay home? What if the Wright brothers thought only birds should fly? And what if Galoka didn't thought that the Ulus were too ugly to save? And he delivers that line. It is so dumb and so silly, and he delivers it so perfectly. And then 2 lines later, Alex is like, I'm not those guys. I'm just a kid from a trailer park. And then Satari replies to Alex saying, look, if that's all you ever think, that's all you'll ever be. And I don't know. I think that line in particular was delivered so well. That whole scene is so well executed. And it's, I'm not trying to diminish Guest in the role or in the part, but I think that really Robert Preston delivering those lines was something that really spoke to me, when I was 10. I don't know if that's a thing you guys share, but that's, I've always appreciated that about this movie. Again, the very heartfelt nature of it.
Well, it goes back to the thing that I mentioned earlier. This is really about people's dreams and, dreaming big. And Alex, has other dreams, but he's given a chance to live an even bigger dream, and it inspires Lewis and, all the people there in Starbright Trailer Park get the same kind of vibe, and they do that. It's, like I said, very much Harold Hill at the end of The Music Man. Although Centauri doesn't come back to Starbright and cheer everybody on, he might as well be, marching in front of them at the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think we've covered basically everything that I had written down that I wanted to cover, but I'd love to open it up to anyone else. Is there anything else that, let's start with Todd. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about the film in particular that we haven't covered so far?
I mean, I think we've pretty well covered it. I will throw out that the movie does leave itself open for a sequel that we have never gotten in a couple of ways. One being that, the great last shot of Lewis there at the video game, but also Zur escapes.
Yes.
And, we're like,
and Alex is asked to rebuild the Starfighter League as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows? Legacy sequel, 40 years later, we get, we get Alex with a gray beard and Zur's still on the road, and I don't know.
The penultimate Starfighter.
Sorry, I'm laughing at that way too much.
That's okay. The thing that I think is interesting about this is this is a video game-based movie without a video game. They apparently had one planned, but it never came out. It wasn't in arcades. I don't know. I don't think it was ever available for home play. Maybe all those tech wizards out there who have been able to find things over the years can dig it out of some crypto forum from 1987 and play the game. But it just seemed like it was a natural, like Tron. they turned it into a video game, and I think the video game was probably more successful than the movie was. This just screams we should have the video game. And I'm just not a gamer, by the way, but I would have watched people play the damn game.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
What I was saying, that actually was a game based on The Last Starfighter, but it was given the name Star Raiders 2 rather than actually tying into The Last Starfighter.
Was that a home game, or was that a console
home game?
Yeah, okay.
I do feel like it, maybe it was a marketing failure. They didn't have an arcade cabinet of this game in every arcade in the world in 1984-85. But even as Atari points out, it's really hard to make a game to merchandise them, to get them in stores by Christmas. So
it's tough.
I mean, we get things like this to get a rush out of a game is how you get ET for the 2600.
True, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Was there anything else you wanted to cover, Tony? Anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's interesting that the actual arcade game wasn't originally intended to be at the trailer park. It was originally meant to go to Vegas. And it's one where you can kind of see the logic of Centauri sending it to the big, gaming city, even if they're all different type of gaming, but the gaming city in America, and just end up here. It's we're going where it needs to go rather than where they want it to go, kind of thing that works well for this kind of sci-fi. I was finding we've got the bounty hunters, the Zazan coming to capture Alex, and the action scenes with Beta, and get some fun little bit with Beta taking the Wicked's truck and just ramming there's end with it. It's got a good chuckle when in the cinema.
I mean, it's a fun scene. I love this whole movie. I love it so much. It's always been one that's been around for me. Like I said at the beginning, this is one that I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Trekkie, and I do love Star Wars as well. But this is also that third franchise. It's a franchise of one, but it's one that's always been around for me. Very pervasive throughout my film watching life. So before we move on to, I have two exit questions for you, but I think, Richard, should we take a break?
Yeah, at this point, we're going to take a break. We're going to basically go into repair mode for a few seconds and hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, but we'll be back for those exit questions in just a minute.
What do Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Treasure of the Sierra Madre have in common? What about Goldfinger and the Spy Who Came In from the Cold, the Blues Brothers, and Silence? There's only one way to find out, and that is to listen to Howard Kasner and Pop Art, a podcast where we find the art in pop culture and the pop culture in art. For each episode, my guest chooses a movie from pop culture, and I'll choose a film from the movie from the more art indie classic foreign side of cinema that has a connection to it. So for those who want to know about Jurassic Park and Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein, tune into Pop Art on Apple iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, and other streaming platforms near you.
We've returned to Rylos, and we're here to finish off our discussion of The Last Starfighter with a couple of exit questions that were inspired by our champion today. So, Matthew, why don't you go ahead and remind us what it is that you were asking us before we try to give our answers?
All right, so I have two exit questions, and the first one is a little more broad, so I'm going to start with it. So, obviously, a big trend in cinema lately has been legacy sequels, which are films that come 20, 30, 40 years later as a sequel to something from usually the 80s or 90s. There's been some great ones, like Creed, Top Gun Maverick, and there's been a lot of stinkers as well. But there's been a lot, like The Last Starfighter, that don't have any sequels, and I'm curious, what would you guys greenlight? Let's go around the room, and we'll start with Todd. If you could greenlight us a legacy sequel to a film that doesn't yet have one, what would be the film for you?
If you step on mine, Todd, I'm going to hate you.
I don't know if I will here, because I think this one is more rooted in the fact that I was much younger when this came out. But when I start thinking about legacy sequels, I always go, well, I want the next generation of the Goonies. Going to see that movie when I was, I would have been 14, because that was the year after Last Starfighter. I went with all my neighborhood kids. All the neighbors that we all grew up together. We all played together every summer, all that stuff. I was the oldest of that group, and we all went and saw the Goonies together. So it was kind of like our gang going and seeing this gang having an adventure. And I've always thought, it would be fun to have something where we see, those people back again. I mean, the great majority of those actors are still in the industry. I mean, winning Academy Awards and things like that. And, have them be there as the adults, and, their kids go on an adventure or something like that. I've always thought that would be fun.
I mean, I'm one of the lone people who I've never been a huge fan of the Goonies. Probably because I saw it too late. I didn't see it until I was well into being I was nearly 20 when I first saw it. So, but I think a legacy sequel to it would be really great. There's so many great actors in the Goonies that are all still great actors today that I think that would be an amazing sequel. Richard, how about yourself?
Well, mine's easy because it's already been announced, and I've been waiting for it for 40 damn years. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League. Why the hell is that not on the screens this year, celebrating the 40th anniversary?
40th anniversary.
Oh, my gosh. It's a natural. It's announced at the end of the film. The characters, most of the actors, I think, would be happy to do it. The World Crime League is just this. I don't know anything about it except I want Buckaroo Banzai to kick their butts.
I mean, what else do you need? That's I want to see that too.
Maybe I'll finally explain what the watermelon was about.
That's right. We'll finally get an explanation about that.
It's one of those ones actually that's kind of amazing to me that it didn't do well enough to get a whole series of sequels. It seems like a pretty natural fit, but
it was just too weird for its time.
Yeah.
And
it's one of those films that if it came out today, it probably would be a franchise. It's maybe just ahead of its time.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who they would get that would ever be the equal of Lord John Worfen, played by Emilio Lizardo, played by John Lithgow. My gosh, we get those two characters crammed into one body, and we need something that big. I mean, maybe that's why they couldn't make it.
Someone who can do it as perfect an Italian accent as that's a completely flawless Italian accent. Yeah, you don't have one who goes that. Think about who can go as big as John Lithgow in that.
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
I mean, John Lithgow's alive. That's all I'm going to put out there. So,
well, I'll tell you, it's like the long lost twin brother. Well, because they've done long lost twins, so I'll say the long lost twin brother of Dr. Lizard, who's possessed by another ancient evil.
Yeah, or just a clone. Make a clone. They're trying to clone me anyway. We could pitch this all day. I'm pretty sure. Tony, tell me, what would yours be?
Yeah, so I've got really two answers to this. One which is probably more of a sequel in terms of the style of it, and not really in terms of getting the characters. But I think you could do some interesting stuff now, bringing back the Quatermass series. Well, and seeing that the bit of the legacy in the science world, and having people following on from the work done by Quatermass in the original 3 films. But I feel like that's something that probably more suited for TV, given it's the roots of Quatermass as a TV series. But in terms of the actual main one, I'm thinking, especially since we've got some other source material that they can use for sequels, I think you could do a really good legacy sequel to Secrets of Nim, as long as it stays 2D animation. I mean, Don Bluth's still alive, so he can still do some work on it. Still know how involved he is still in the animation world, but you can get him to do at least some work on it, at least as a consultant. But I really think you could do some great stuff with Secret of NIMH, showing evolution of the community of rats as they've adopted new technologies, and then maybe go on the darker side, show the modern works of testing in animal rights, and show how there's still the lingering effects of the testing of the rats, and whether it's that knowledge is leaked out into the wider public, and there's some of the conflict between the rats and humanity. I feel like there's a lot of interesting story possibilities you can get with a sequel to Secret of NIMH.
That's a great call. The Secret of NIMH is another one of those like formative animated films, and it's never come to mind as a legacy sequel, but now that you've said it, I'm disappointed that it's never happened and that I've never thought about it.
There are 2 other books in the NIMH series, and you'll also have to completely ignore Secret of NIMH 2 as well, which I think everyone wants to ignore that.
There's no Secret of NIMH 2. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, and then you just turn it into Pinky in the Brain at the end. It's just, what the hell are they doing with that film?
I don't know, because it doesn't exist. It's fine. For me, I've thought about this a lot. And I also sort of have 2 answers. And the reason for that is that in the 1990s, there was a string of films that were based on 1930s serials. And some of them were good. Some of them were great.
The Phantom, Shadow.
Some of them were good, and some of them were not so great. But I would legitimately kill for a legacy sequel to The Rocketeer, which there is a kids show now. To be fair, and I don't know if I'm the only one, but I would actually really love to see another version of the Shadow. I would love to see that story continued. I'd love to see Alec Baldwin as Lamont Cranston training another Shadow or something like that. I know we have Batman. Batman exists, so we don't necessarily need the Shadow, but I think the Shadow is actually more interesting. And I just love that 30s aesthetic, and they could, just like time jump it to even, do a film exploring, the relevance of the Shadow 40 years later, like in the 70s, or just jump ahead to the 40s or the 50s with someone else. I don't care. Just make more of the Shadow. Make more of the Rocketeer. That's what I want.
I mean, for the Rocketeer, if I'm remembering right, I remember hearing that talk of having a sequel with David Oyelowo producing and taking over the role, in terms of having him play a member of the Tuskegee Airmen who gets possession of the rocket pack. I feel like some interesting stuff can do from that, but I think that was announced a few years ago now, and nothing's really happened since then.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a kids show that I haven't watched, which maybe it's good. I like some kids shows. I like Star Trek Prodigy, so there's always a chance. But I would love to see a proper big screen return of the Rocketeer and or the Shadow.
So wait a minute. By what you said leading up to this, are you suggesting that the Phantom is not the good one?
I think so. I like the Phantom, but I don't know if it's a good movie. It's a very hammy. It's a very hammy movie. I'm not the biggest fan of Zane, although I think he's good in the movie.
But Treat Williams is so bonkers in that movie.
I was going to say there's 2 things about that movie that make it great. 3 things about that movie I'll say that make it great is, one, I do really love that 30s aesthetic, that Art Deco aesthetic that it really plays into. And I just love that kind of adventure story. But also Treat Williams is really good as the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And also Catherine Zeta-Jones exists. So
there you go.
And that movie came out again, we talked about Catherine Mary Stewart. That movie came out when I was 13. It was an important movie for me as a young straight boy, and I would love to see more of that. It's and honestly, if they wanted to do a sequel to The Phantom, I would not turn it down. I would watch the hell out of it. So It just wouldn't be my first choice. It would be my second choice after the Rocketeer and the Shadow. So.
For probably many people, it is the preferred Crystal Skulls movie. So.
I mean, you're not wrong, are you? Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing a bit like a sequel to the 90s Shadow, you'd probably want to avoid too overt references to the original now.
Yeah, probably.
Given who played the Shadow.
Well, good. I'm glad we all have those. I did have another question, and that was, let's. I don't remember who we're starting with, so let's start with Tony. All right, so Tony, you are 17 years old. You're stuck in a trailer park, and there's a video game that'll get you recruited into a franchise of choice. For me, this is. So I'd like to stress, you can make up a game or use a game that exists. But what game are you playing to get into what franchise?
So, in terms of what I would have been playing at that time when I was 17, in terms of games that would have been getting really involved in the world of it, when I was 17, I'd have been playing a lot of the Batman Arkham games. So, probably been getting into that world. In terms of actually style, something similar to something like the Last Starfighter. Then you've also got the reboot of the XCOM series that's actually be something interesting. But in terms of what I'd be playing, it would be more of the Batman Arkham games.
Mm-hmm. I mean, who doesn't want to be Batman? That's a great answer.
Especially who doesn't want to be Kevin Conroy Batman?
That's true. The Batman.
Yeah.
Todd, how about yourself?
Well, at 17, it would have been the original NES, so probably the best answer would be Duck Hunt.
What? Just so you can shoot that laughing dog?
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with that little red pistol, so
I mean, that's maybe the best answer so far.
Now, what franchise would you get in with that? Would you Howard the Duck?
Howard the Duck, yeah, sure, whatever.
Okay, well,
there was that Duck movie from last year, wasn't there? Yeah.
I'm sure this would be a bit of a different question for you, because I don't know that when you were 17, video games were a thing. But like, what game are you playing? What franchise are you getting into?
Well,
like,
if I was 17, it might have been Space Invaders. I'm not sure if Space Invaders was quite invented when I was 17. Otherwise, I'm stuck with Pong. And I don't know that Pong...
That will get you into the Challengers franchise.
Yeah, there you are. But I thought of Space Invaders because that really was the only level of video gaming I ever engaged in, and I wasn't enamored of it. I didn't spend all my quarters doing that. I would rather play foosball or play cards, at that time. But I did play Space Invaders occasionally, and I think that would get me into the first Avengers film, because we're fighting off Space Invaders, and I can go to my left and I can go to my right. I just can't do it very fast.
Yeah.
Although if there's actual big main series that you could get into, given that it's the only thing I know of that had someone do a physical recreation of Space Invaders, and this will probably only make sense if you listen to this to Jay, but in Taskmaster when comedian Rod Gilbert did a full-scale recreation of Space Invaders with 50 people in the Taskmaster production team, and spent most of it trying to hit the plums of every man that was doing it.
That sounds ridiculous and fun.
Yeah, that's Taskmaster.
For me, this is a pretty easy question, because in the mid-90s there was a video game called Star Trek 25th Anniversary where you got to play as captain of a starship, and that gets me into Star Wars or Star Trek. So there you go. That's my answer. A lifelong Trekkie, so it's a pretty easy one. Whatever game will get me into Trek, that's the one I'm playing.
That's a good choice. Who wouldn't want to be in Star Trek? You should, and you could jump in without actually having to go to the academy.
Yeah, and the game, the Star Trek 25th anniversary, where you literally you control the Enterprise and you play you basically do original series missions with Kirk and Spock and Bones. So it's a pretty easy sell of that being it's like a command simulator, and you're just in. So yeah,
I like them. Well, thank you for the exit questions, Matthew. I appreciate your coming up with those for this week's show. I want to give everybody a chance to plug whatever it is that they have that we should be turning our eyes and ears to. Tony, have you got something fresh for us to look at on your site, or something that you want us to listen to that you've been involved in?
So, yeah, in terms of stuff on my site, I've recently, as in about half an hour before we did this recording, put up a review of Hundreds of Beavers, which has just got its UK release.
Fantastic movie. Everybody will watch Hundreds of Beavers. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it's really annoying that most cinemas in the UK, it's only got 1 day, 1 time screening, but I was lucky enough to be able to go to one of the cinemas that was doing multiple screenings of it, and it was a blast. If you can see it with an audience, see it with an audience. It's a brilliant experience.
And no spoilers there, right? You're not the kind of kid who sneaks down to peek at his Christmas presents, right?
And then on my site, again, just shout out to my podcast on The Wicker Man. You listen to. Recently, aside from that, I was on the Fight Club Minutes podcast, which I got to talk about last time with Bullwheat, and I was on the Forgotten Film Cast about Ice Cold in Alex with Todd.
Very good. Todd, that sounds like a natural transition to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for mentioning that, Tony. Yeah, we've always got episodes of the Forgotten Filmcast coming out. That one with Tony was pretty recent. We had a recent one with Kristen Lopez where we talked about Sister Sister, starring Eric Stoltz and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Last week's episode was with Matt Poirier from the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur, where we talked about a film called King of the Mountain, starring Harry Hamlin and a very whacked out Dennis Hopper. I am in process working on this week's episode, which is going to be with The Vern, where we're talking about Cuffs, starring Christian Slater and Mila Jovovich. And then next week's episode, going back to another 1984 film, Movie Rob joins me, and we're going to talk about Kidco.
You're on top of it. All right, 1984 still lives.
Absolutely.
Matthew, have you got something else other than the Last Starfighter that you want us to turn our eyes to?
Yeah, so I write freelance for a number of outlets, including Exclaim.ca, which is a fairly big publication in Canada. Most recently, I wrote for them about the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I also host the Awesome Friday podcast, which has been on hiatus for July. We'll be back in August, where we review 2 new movies every week. The easiest way to catch up with any and all of the stuff that I write and talk about would be just to go to my homepage, which is stretched.ca.
I always put that link in because there's so much content there in so many different places. It's easier for people to just get it at that aggregate site. Very good.
Yeah.
And on my site, as usual, I'm just struggling to keep up with things that I've seen in the theater, and having seen 6 movies in theaters in the last 2 days, I'm falling behind. I've got another one lined up in another hour from now, and another for this evening, and then one on Monday night. Holy criminy! I'm going to be 9 films down. Oh, it's a good week. It's a good week. It's all right. But one of those films, by the way, is Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. So that is happening Monday night. I'm looking forward to that. Tonight, we're going to have Robert Rodriguez hosting First Blood. He is a local hero here in Austin, and he has hosted a number of screenings at the Paramount Summer Film Classic Series. And he did Star Trek II earlier this year, And we had Terminator 2 last week, and he's hosting First Blood tonight, so that'll be a lot of fun, and I'll have a post up on that. Lots of things to see. By the way, we haven't done rants, raves, and reviews, but I got to throw in one here because I've been seeing people talk this up. Longlegs, as stupid as all F. Save your money. It pissed me off. All right. End of public service announcement. Thank you.
So Longlegs is this year's Barbie for you, I guess.
Oh man, it's the lighthouse all wrapped into one.
I was going to say it's to the lighthouse.
I sat there hating it the whole time, and I was so patient, and I got to the end, and Amanda walked out with me, and she looked at me, and she said, well, what did you think? And I said, I hated that effing movie. And she said, I'm so glad that I'm not the only one who felt that way. So the two of us were in simpatico on that one. Apparently, we're not in sympathy with the rest of the world. It's doing very well. It's gotten very good reviews. People are crazy. It's not good. All right.
I only disagree in that I think that the first half is good, and I think that it falls apart after that.
There are things in this movie that could have worked and should have worked. They didn't figure out how to do it, and
my best explanation about this movie, and I don't want to go into too big of a rant here, but I basically agree with you. But I always remember that anecdote about how when they were making the movie Alien, when they were cutting it together, they realized that it wasn't a scary movie because the alien itself wasn't very scary. And so they cut a whole bunch of the alien out and left it in shadows and background. And Longlegs shows the alien too early and too much.
Yeah, I think so. And there are other issues too. But like I said, I didn't mean to turn it into a rant, but here we are. Sorry about that, folks. Look, I want to thank you guys for hanging out here. I'm glad that we don't have to just sit around watching me shine my pickup. We're doing something with our lives. So you guys, thanks again for joining us. Let's just all have fun, and may the luck of the 7 Pillars of Gulu be with you at all times.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha